All right, well, hello and welcome. I'm the Kodiak Broncos Podcast. If you think I look or sound tired, it's because I am. But no rest for the weary, because now we're here to talk about the 2022 draft class and me basically regrading it. But before I get into it, I just want to say a couple things. First of all, leave a like if you enjoy, subscribe if you're not already. You can always wait until the end. Hopefully, I've earned it. And yeah, so without further ado, time to talk about the 2022 draft class. And here's me basically regrading and reflecting on all our picks at that time. So, just entering the 2022 offseason and the draft class in general, and the draft in general, I should say. Obviously we were the big talk of the offseason because we traded for Russell Wilson. And, the year before, I remember everybody being like, dang, the rest of this team is really solid, but we're a quarterback away. So, naturally, your draft is going to get a little worse when you do strap yourself with resources, when you trade away a first round pick, a second round pick, and I think they traded away another pick in this specific draft as well. But regardless, a lot of people thought we were ready to go all in. So yeah, we basically went all in. And the year before, we had a really, really good draft where we got Surtain, Miners, Browning, and Cooper. Browning didn't end up being anything. Javante as well. But we expected these guys to be very solid contributors to this team going forward. But once again, traded for Russell Wilson. Then we picked up Randy Gregory, Alex Singleton, and K'Wan Williams. These guys were all supposed to be something when they were brought into the team in March, and obviously Gregory absolutely barfed with us, but he was projected to have an impact on this team. So, without further ado, I am going to talk about our first pick of the draft, which didn't even come until 64th overall, and that was Nick Bonito. And obviously, we got an A+ here. So, I'm going to be honest, with Nick Bonito specifically, I never saw this level of play coming from him after his rookie year and after his 2023. Coming into this past year, I was like, all right, Nick Bonito, he's a good Robin, but we need a Batman in that edge room. And honestly, him and Cooper just took monumental strides. So, uh, yeah, I'm really, really happy with the progression of Bonito. I don't know how you couldn't be. The dude absolutely bleeds orange and blue. I expect him to be a team captain at some point throughout his career. And, it just makes it even better that you use the pick that you got from the LA Rams for Von Miller to draft Nick Bonito. So that's like the ultimate win-win trade right there. LA gets their Super Bowl. We basically get to reset the clock with our pass rushers as well. And last year, he was so significant down the stretch for us. And, if there's one caveat you could say that an abnormal amount of his production came, when the game was well out of hand or we were just getting blown out. But in the case of the Baltimore game, but listen, he was so crucial to our team down the stretch. It felt like every week the announcer would say something like, Nick Bonito with his eighth sack, or with a sack in his eighth straight game. That is the longest streak that the Broncos have had since Von Miller. So just the fact that we were able to get pass rushing consistency again was absolutely huge. And guess what? He made two gargantuan plays down the stretch as well. So, I think he's kind of got that clutch gene in him. Even though I'm still waiting to see him, sack the quarterback to close out a game, the fact that he got that pick six off Jameis Winston, the fact that he got that pick six off A.D. Mitchell, which completely turned the tide of that game into our favor, that was absolutely clutch. And, he's not a perfect edge. I still do have some issues with him setting the edge as a run defender. I do still have some issues with him against physical offensive linemen like Rashawn Slater. Kind of had him in prison this past year against the Chargers. But listen, an all-pro at 64th overall, that's absolutely amazing. And there's no amount of cherry picking I can do. Even as a guy who's not really in favor of George Paton and hasn't really been over the past few years, this is absolutely amazing no matter how you slice it. So, yeah, this is A+ here. The only question is, what are you signing for? Who's your priority between Bonito and Allen? Probably, I still lean Bonito. Like, I know that that's not going to be popular, and I know that his production is easier to replace in our scheme. But with an edge like Nick Bonito, since edge is the most valuable position in the NFL, or second most valuable position in the NFL, I still go with the young dude who's still a rising star. Greg Dulcich, 80th overall. Yeah, that's all I have to say about this one. But it's just rare that a player gets cut from the worst tight end room in the league because they are so bad. When you can't get on the field over Lucas Kroll, Adam Troutman, Nate Adkins, the writing is basically on the wall for your NFL career. Certainly a no future with the Broncos as well. I think he's stashed away on the Giants practice squad, and once again, that's another tight end room that's an absolute mess right now. But either way, I'll never, ever understand what happened to Greg Dulcich. There were reasons to believe that he could have been pretty good for this team. Even coming into this year, I know a lot of people at training camp said that he looked really good and that he didn't look like the same Greg Dulcich that, had been often injured in 2022 and 2023. But he just played himself off the team. He played himself out of a job, and they put all their eggs into the Greg Dulcich basket, and they got poor blocking. They got poor route running. They got absolutely no chemistry with Nix. The dude's hands looked like they were made of stone anytime he actually got thrown the ball this year. And listen, the time off from football, it just seemed to be something that he never recovered from. And, we bet big on Dulcich coming into 2024, and part of that was because we didn't have the resources because we traded for Russell Wilson and Sean Payton to, attack the tight end position, attack the linebacker position, attack running back, attack safety, all those positions that are lower on the value totem pole. We didn't have a lot of resources to rectify those if in the case that we were not happy with what we had. But, this was a big bet on Dulcich being the dude that he was his rookie year, and it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. It doesn't make sense to me because he looked really good. He looked really good in a Hackett offense. Why did he look awful in a Sean Payton offense? I don't know. Some dudes, they just can't handle the mental taxation of the NFL, and when you are off the field for as long as he was, it just doesn't spell good, especially when you're a young player. So, yeah. Demari Matthysse, 115th overall. So, he just became a rapper. So, I think the writing is kind of on the wall with his NFL career. He released a rap album 4 days ago, and I already talked about this on my players we should cut video. But regardless, Demari Matthysse, I'm just not expecting him to be anything, especially because Jahdae Barron basically put a dagger into expecting Demari Matthysse to have any sort of role next year that is not him being the CB6 on our depth chart. So when I think about Demari Matthysse, I'm taken back to a guy who played very physical at the cornerback position. Like, he wasn't afraid to mix it up. He wasn't afraid to tackle at all. But, his rookie year, he was kind of overshadowed by Darby, at least immediately, and K'Wan Williams is obviously in the slot. But in 2023, he was supposed to be the cornerback too. Riley Moss was hurt during training camp, so he was kind of given the job by default, and unfortunately, he just barfed. He fell flat on his face as well. He was a big part of that Miami disaster, same with the guy who we're going to talk about later. He was an absolute tire fire. I remember 2023 week 1, he was getting obliterated by Jacoby Myers in that game, and he's a big reason why we lost. So, Jimmy Garoppolo also looked like Tom Brady that game, and it just didn't look good at all for our defense. We couldn't get off the field on third down, and Matthysse was a big reason why. And listen, Demari Matthysse, he does have his spot in the NFL, at least for now, if he wants to keep playing, and if he doesn't want to be a rapper, which I imagine he wants to keep playing football, but I won't be surprised if that changes quickly. We're paying him $3 million to be a cornerback 6, and, he made some nice plays this year because he was limited with his deployment. Like, we did throw him out there occasionally. We did throw him out there against the Saints. We did throw him out there against the Browns occasionally. I think more in dime than anything else, but yeah. Once again, I'm not going to be surprised if that changes quickly, but overall, it's hard for me to consider this a hit. So it's not a hit. It's not a monumental whiff at all either. Like, he has nice depth, but yeah, I don't know. I gave it a C minus. So Yumo Werrique. So looking at his snaps from this past year, like, he's not great, but he's not bad either. So you could have done much worse in the 4th round here. The problem is you really could have used him before you absolutely retooled the defensive line. He didn't have a chance to be in an NFL building for almost a year. I imagine he was training because I don't imagine he was just sitting around doing nothing. But the charges were ultimately dropped from his betting reputation at Iowa State because he did get charged with betting while he was at Iowa State, in addition to being charged while he was playing with the Broncos. But, the evidence seems to be clear that he did bet $21,000 on the Denver Broncos while he was a player and while he was a game day inactive for those games. I don't know if he bet on them to win or lose, but that is besides the point here. It's just really hard to defend a dude who would rather use FanDuel than study the defensive playbook. Like, listen, did the Broncos get unlucky with this? Yeah, sure. Like, they probably didn't know anything about, like, him gambling or having a gambling addiction or anything like that. But they were the ones who picked him. They were the ones whose scouts felt okay with, taking a shot on him. And I don't know. I just think that it's really, really hard to spin this in any positive light, even if I do think he's shown some decent things on the field. Because decent when you're a 4th round pick, yeah, that's all right. Like, in 2022, I thought he had an all right rookie season for a 4th round pick. But, yeah, I think his roster spot is pretty much in jeopardy at this point, especially with us adding Savion Jones as well. So Delaren Turner, 152nd overall. With our fifth round safeties like Kane Stearns, Jamar Johnson, DTY, we need to stop expecting big things out of them, man. I guess the key is to take them in the sixth round instead, and Jail Skinner has shown collectively more than any of those guys had to this point as well. And listen, I'm just not expecting this guy to have a future on this team, barring a fourth year breakout. And he has gotten unlucky as well with his injuries. Like he's gotten, I think he was on the PUP list the entire 2024 year. And then in 2023, I think he tore his ACL or MCL or meniscus or one of those midway through the year. But even when he was on the field, he got absolutely abused. And when you think back to the 2023 Miami debacle, there's two names that stick out to me, and Delaren Turner is definitely one of them. And, when he did get the spot starts in 2023, he ultimately was given a perfect passer rating when targeted against. And I do think that the second game that happened the first was obviously Miami. I think the second game was when Justin Fields absolutely tore us apart for 3 quarters and we ended up coming back. Regardless, we need to stop putting too much stock into these like fifth round safeties, man. They're exciting to think about, but it seems like for whatever reason they're often injured, and maybe our fortune changes now that we have Bo Lowry. But this is an F right here, and I don't expect him to stay around, especially because the coaching staff opted in favor of Key over DTY as far as depth as well. Montreal Washington, 162nd overall. So whoever made this pick, like, what are you doing, man? What are you doing? So I understand being excited when you watch a guy from Samford of all colleges run back 2 kicks against Florida, an SEC team. But kudos to him for making that happen because that earned him like 2 years in the NFL. I don't know if he's still with the Chiefs. I didn't really even look it up. But listen, I don't remember anything about him besides muff punch, bad awareness, just bad special teams play in general. And, the coaching staff back then did him no favors. Dwayne Stukes, Brock Olivo, Tom McMahon, we have a laundry list of bad special teams coordinators in Broncos country. High salute to Caught Weekend Mike Westhoff for turning it around, but our unit was horrendously unclutched, so time for Darren Rizzi to put his stamp on this team as well. Regardless, with Montreal Washington, all I just got to say is even if you're not thinking about the fumbles, even if you're not thinking about the bad awareness, even if you're not thinking about the really puzzling run back decisions, you just got to think about the fact that we went from this guy to a 2-time All-Pro returner in Marvin Mims. So count your lucky stars. Even though Marvin Mims did struggle to get on the field as a receiver his rookie year, listen, you just got to count your lucky stars with this one because you have a 2-time All-Pro returner in Mims. So hug your Marvin Mims tight tonight because I have PTSD from Montreal, Washington as well. Grade definitive F. I don't even know how long he lasted on the team. I think he got cut midway through 2022, which I'm not surprised about. The dude was legitimately so terrible. I remember the OT game against the Chargers, Monday Night Football, Week 6 in 2022, and I don't know if it was his fault. I know it was between him and PJ Locke, who muffed the punt in overtime. I'll have to go back and rewatch that, but that's just all I remember about Montreal, Washington, to be honest. Luke Watenberg, 171st overall. So he went from being one of the worst offensive linemen I've ever watched to the NFL's second best pass blocking center. Going back to the 2022, the Hackett year, the first year with Russell Wilson, and just all the poor coaching that went on, the offensive line was just so bad. And Butch Barry, who was the offensive line coach at that point, unfortunately held a lot of the responsibility for that as well. And if there's anything Zach Strief should hang his hat on, it's Wattenberg's development. Because this dude, I remember thinking, wow, he's legitimately one of the worst offensive linemen I've ever watched. And then you look at a lot of the pass blocking metrics as far as centers this past year, the only guy who's ahead of him in a lot of them is Creed Humphrey. And say what you want about his run blocking, I understand, I wasn't entirely thrilled with his run blocking either, but he was the NFL's second best pass blocking center this past year. And for all the fans who wanted to upgrade over Wattenberg this past year, I'm just all right, if the upgrade we bring in is anything less than the NFL's second best pass blocking center, then it's not an upgrade. And I think the Broncos share that sentiment as well. Maybe Clay Webb becomes something, maybe Xavier Truss becomes something, but Wattenberg is going to be a starter going into next year. I know a lot of people aren't happy about that, but I am, especially when you have a young quarterback whose offensive line should be built to pass protect as well. And by the way, a lot of the underlying run analytics that we had implies that we did a pretty good job as an O-line at opening holes and whatnot, but our running backs just couldn't take advantage this past year. And listen, I do think Wattenberg does have a lack of force in the run game. and it doesn't put him into that A-plus category for me when I'm just rating on how was the pick. But, this was a great fifth-round pick. And also, one last thing is that Watenberg, he solved a big question heading into 2024 training camp, which was, who's going to be the center? Is it going to be Forsyth? Is it going to be Wattenberg? And overwhelmingly, the answer is Watenberg, in my opinion. The O-line did look better run blocking with Forsyth, but once again, KC blocked field goal disaster. It's got to be Wattenberg's job to lose. Matt Hennington. So I was really excited about him because I remember Brett Coleman talking about him 3 years ago, recapping the Broncos draft, and he was just like, this dude stylistically compares very well to Aaron Donald. And I was just like, all right, cool. Well, if he just has the athleticism and just needs to refine his tools, then, that's great or whatever. Why not take a shot on him in the 6th round? So I don't disagree with the philosophy of the pick, but he just hasn't worked out. Like, that's just basically all I got to say. And once the Broncos retooled the defensive line, once they added Roach, once they got good play from DJ Jones again, once they added JFN, the writing was kind of on the wall for him. And listen, he was a part of the problems that we had on the D-line in 2023. I was really pissed about our D-line in 2023, and I thought Zach Allen was completely overrated and a bad signing. But now that I think about it, I'm just like, wow, he was playing next to Matt Hennington and who was that guy? Jonathan Harris, I think. So he was trying to cover for a lot of their deficiencies. And to be completely honest, I think Hennington was a part of the problem. He was a big part of the problem. And he is not on the 53-man roster anymore. He's now on the practice squad. And maybe he sticks around as a practice squad guy. But the writing is on the wall with the Savion Jones pick. The reason I gave him a D is because in the 6th round, it's hard to be upset with a dude who's giving you 400 snaps back-to-back years, which is what he did in his rookie year and his 2023 year. But, they weren't productive snaps. I never thought he was, making a play or anything like that. So, yeah. The writing's on the wall with the Savion Jones pick. Hennington, much like a Werrique, I think we've seen enough. Here are my final thoughts. So, the hits were obviously enormous. Oh, also, Faion Hicks, I think, was our 7th-round pick, but I literally remember nothing about that dude, so I'm not even going to try to talk about him. So the hits were enormous, but the gaffes also were enormous, and you're not going to hit on everyone, especially when you trade away your 1st-round pick, your 2nd-round pick, and whatnot. But there was very little middle ground in this draft class. I think the one guy who I did not grade an A, a D, or an F was Demari Matthysse, and that's really saying something. And it just gets magnified when you trade for Russell Wilson, when you trade for Sean Payton to be your head coach. But yeah, and getting Bonito, and to a lesser extent, I made a spelling error there. Watenberg was absolutely crucial for this draft class in general. And, looking at this in the grand scheme of things, this, I think, is going to be one that George Paton is not really going to look fondly on. When you have a coaching staff like Nathaniel Hackett and you have a completely lost head coach, you have a completely lost special teams coordinator, and pretty much every position coach that you had got shipped off immediately after Sean Payton was hired, yeah, the writing is kind of on the wall there. It wasn't helped by poor coaching or development either. There's honestly no excuse for the guys that are still on this team anymore, considering they've had 2 years of Sean Payton coaching them. But yeah, you never know how a guy like that, Hackett, can stunt their development early on. And, I gave this draft a C+ because you hit so monumentally on Bonito and, like I said, to a lesser extent, Watenberg. But, yeah, once again, if not for Bonito, this draft is probably a resounding F. But, you know what? Without that, I mean, Nick Bonito was a part of this draft class, so you got to judge him accordingly. And, yeah, especially when you trade your 1st-round pick, 2nd-round pick, coming away with 2 solid players, I think is overall a pretty decent class. Yeah, if I'm just looking at it in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, so just let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, and I will see you guys next time. I'll have a salute.